Hi, my name is Nate, and in this video I'll be showing a number of tips which I hope will allow you to be as productive as possible when using Spine. I assume you already have basic knowledge of how Spine works, so this video will move quickly and show some of the more esoteric features. So let's start. When running Spine from the command line, you can specify a parameter named keys. This will cause Spine to show hotkey pop-ups, which are useful for tutorial videos like this one. You can right-click on Windows. You can right-click the close button, which will cause Spine to be always on top. You can press F1 to instantly get tooltips so you don't have to wait. You can resize the tree by grabbing this handle. In the tree, you can click collapse and expand to expand all of the nodes if nothing is selected. Otherwise, it does the selected node. The shortcut for that is right-click, which makes it a lot faster to dig through the tree. You can also hide individual items in the tree, types of items. So you can show, for example, only bones, or you can show only images, which is useful when dealing with skins, because you can more easily see the skin attachments to drag images into. Showing only slots is useful for manipulating the draw order. So the draw order node goes away, and these slots show up in their draw order and can be dragged just like they can in the draw order node. You can control click items in the tree. You can change the draw order for multiple items at the same time. You can click and then shift click to select a range in the tree. You can manipulate the draw order by pressing plus and minus, which also works in the editor. You can double-click items in the tree to rename. You can double-click the skins, animations, and events nodes to add a new skin animation or event. For the images path, this is relative to the project file, which is useful for sharing your project. Otherwise, it can be an absolute path. And Spine will load a few hundred images from this directory and then stop. If you really want it to load all images, you can click the All button. Just be careful not to point Spine to, for example, the root of your hard drive when you're loading all images. The images that are under the images directory are watched. So if they are changed or new ones are added or images are removed, Spine will update automatically, which makes for a faster art manipulation iteration. In the tree, there's a set parent button, and a parent can be chosen in the tree, but it can also be chosen in the editor, which is typically a lot faster to see which parent you want to click. You can also drag and drop in the tree to change the parent. You can press P, which is the same as clicking set parent. And that's useful especially in the editor when setting up a skeleton to quickly move images onto bones. In the editor, to select, you click. You can click and drag to box select. If you already have a selection and you hold Control, you can add to that selection, and you can also drag a box to add to that selection. If you have something selected and you click and drag an empty space, that will manipulate that bone. If you click and drag on a new bone, it changes the selection to the new bone, which makes it a lot faster. There's an options pane here, which can disable selection of images, which is useful in setup mode when manipulating the skeleton, but not the images. You can hide images or bones, and if the bones are hidden, they can still be selected on mouse over, which makes it easier to see your art without a bunch of bones in the way. There are also name tags, which can help to identify the different pieces for images and bones. Also, the name tags can be clicked to select, so if there's overlapping bones, the name tags can make it easier to select. For a given image, you can mark it as a background. That will cause the image to not be selectable anymore. And it also won't be exported. So that's intended for templates that you want to use to set up your skeleton, or backgrounds that you don't actually want to select. When you have a tool selected, you can right click and it will switch between that tool and the last tool you used. So you can easily switch between two tools, which is much faster than clicking the buttons. If you have the rotate, translate, or scale tool selected, if you go to the end of the bone, it will change into a little icon which you can drag to change the bone length. You can also set the length in the tree. You can drag the bone length to 0, and that changes the icon for the bone, but it's exactly the same. Nothing is different, only the icon. The only way to get it back if it's a 0 length bone is to change it in the tree. You can adjust multiple bones at the same time. With the translate tool, you can use the arrow keys to nudge. You can use the axes to move, for example, can move the bones, multiple bones along their local axis. If you wanted to make these bones longer, the upper arm longer, you could use the parent to move both bones along their parent, and then you would make the parent bones longer. The pose tool allows you to use inverse kinematics, so you can click and drag to draw a box. If you select two bones, they will move as you'd expect. You can select a single bone. You can also use the rotate tool for this. You can select any number of bones, so you can use control to select two bones even if they're not directly next to each other, and everything still works. You can select multiple hierarchies of bones, so here the left arm can be moved, and you don't lose your selection of the right arm. When you move the other arm, it changes which hierarchy you're manipulating. So this is useful for doing lots of manipulations without losing your selection. Okay, now the create tool. First you select a bone that will be the parent. Then when you click and drag, it creates a new bone. While you are dragging a new bone, you can press Shift, which will allow you to select an image. You can let go of Shift and then finish drawing the bone, and that will cause the image to be parented to the new bone. When you have a bone selected, you can, with the create tool, hold Alt, and then when you draw a bone, it will replace the existing bone, which is very useful for setting up skeletons. Creating new bones isn't really exact, but you can manipulate them easily afterwards. For example, if we create a number of bones, oops, didn't mean to scale them. So we can make all the bones the same length. We can change all of their positions and rotations. And now we have many bones that are all aligned. If you wanted to create two bones, which the second bone is on the tip of the first, you can set the length of the first, and then set the X and Y translation of the second bone to be the length and 0, and it will be positioned in exactly the right place. For the rotate tool, you can select multiple and do additive rotation, for example for a tail. You can also hold Shift to move in 15-degree increments. That works with a single selection as well. Go back to the goblins. There's bone and image compensation. So when you turn on bone compensation, you can manipulate a bone without affecting the child bones. But you'll note the image attached to that bone moves with it. If you use image compensation, the image does not move with it. And of course you can also use both to only move a bone and not the child bones and not the images. In the text fields down here, you can mouse wheel to change the value. Hold shift to change the value even slower. If you don't have a mouse wheel, zooming can be difficult. If you hold control and then right click and move the mouse up and down, that will zoom. That's a shortcut for zoom. Now in the dope sheet, once the dope sheet is open, you can resize it by dragging the dope sheet button. The dope sheet shows all bones if there's no selection. Otherwise it shows only the selected bones. And they show up in the dope sheet in the order that you click them. So if you want to work with keys next to other keys, that's easy to do. If you select the name of a transform over here, rotate, translate, scale, it will select just that bone and check and the appropriate tool. But you notice we lost our selections, and that changed what was in the dope sheet. So it's useful if you want to work with a subset of bones to lock the dope sheet. Now if you change the selection of which bones are selected, it won't change the dope sheet. So now if we click rotate or translate, it changes the tool and selects that bone, but doesn't change what's in the dope sheet. Also, when the dope sheet is locked, if you click a key, it does the same. It selects just that bone and the appropriate tool. So in the dope sheet, you can click and drag to make a box. This allows you to move those keys around. You can also scale them at their edges. You can scale them reverse to flip them. You can hold control and create multiple boxes and move them all, scale them all at the same time. You can also delete them. We zoom in, you can see when moving keys, they jump to integer frames. If you hold shift, then you can move them in between frames. There are overview keys. So these keys will grab all keys of that frame for that bone. At the top, this is an overview for all bones. And if you grab a key here, it will change all bones. So that's easier than trying to select with a box all the bones. Although if you do select, if you drag down, it starts to scroll faster and faster, which you can see when things are expanded. So you can pretty quickly select everything if you needed that. You can click on an empty space to set the timeline position. You can right click to pan. If you pan away from your keys, you can always click the scroll bar at the bottom to go back. The lines in between the keys show you the curve type. So a straight line means that the transition is using a linear curve. If the line is not straight, if it's curved at the beginning and end, you'll know it's using a curve. If there's no line between keys, then, for example here, there is no tweening happening between those two keys. So it's a stepped curve, or the values are identical. In the graph, if you select multiple keys, the first one you select will be the one that you manipulate. The others will show up in the background as gray. If match is off, when you move a key around, it doesn't change the others. If match is on, then it does. You can use that to make many keys have this exact same curve. In the dope sheet, you can double click a key to delete it. You can also use the delete button. When you're moving keys, you can click the shift button, and that will move all keys after the key you're moving. You can use that in the overview, for example, to move all keys in an animation to make more room for more keys if you needed that. For a shortcut for that is to hold Alt. We'll do the same thing. At the bottom of the dope sheet, no matter what your selection is, if you have events, create a quick event here and key it so it shows up in the dope sheet. If you have events here, they show up no matter what bones you have selected. If you want to hide those events, you can hide them in the tree. In the timeline, you can set a loop start and end just by changing the timeline position by clicking and then clicking loop end. So then that will, when looping is on, that will play only that section. To turn looping off, you can just double click either button. If you choose current, then the timeline will scroll automatically. There's a button here for changing for automatically zooming the timeline so that all the keys fit. You can see that better. You can mouse wheel in the timeline to change the zoom. So if we're zoomed in and we click this button, it automatically fits all the keys. If you scrub the timeline, click and hold, that will scrub the timeline. You'll see it jumps by integer frames, similar to when moving keys. If you hold shift, then you'll get in between frames, so you can see the animation very smoothly when you're scrubbing. Also, you can leave the timeline position there and set keys in between integer frames. If you have repeat on and you start scrubbing inside of your animation, when you scrub past the end of the animation, it will loop back to the beginning. That allows you to use scrubbing to see how your loop transitions. If you don't like that, you can begin your drag outside after the last frame. Then it won't do that. It will just go to the last frame and stop. Or, of course, you can turn off looping, and then no matter what you do, scrubbing will never loop. A very common thing is to set up a pose. Oops. And you get your pose just exactly like you want it. Then you realize you're on the wrong timeline position. You want to be somewhere else. So you click somewhere else and you lose your pose. All you have to do is hit undo, you'll get your pose back, and then you can key the pose for the new timeline position. So I think that's all the tips I have for now, but hopefully those were useful while you're using Spine, and we'll see you in the next video.